If there's not a management openness where an employee can come and honestly say, I've got too much work on, if they don't have that openness in place, then you can have big issues.
And what would your advice be to people who think that it's counterintuitive to take a break?
I think that's a loaded question.
If someone was finding themselves in a position where they're making unsafe risks, could it be the management maybe aren't available to provide that support?
It's a good question. I think the important thing is to have an openness towards failure. It's a lesson to be learned rather than an opportunity to be missed.
Hi, I'm Ben. I'm the Service Operations Manager here at Microbyte, and I'm joined today by the Managing Director, Lewis Livingston.
Hello.
Hello, thank you for joining me.
You're welcome.
Today we'll be talking about MSP burnout, things that you can do to help your colleagues and your employees, and anything that we've learned over the years that we've been running the successful MSP. So Lewis, as we know, MSP environments can be quite stressful, a lot of reactive work. How have Microbyte seen that happen over the years, and have they done anything to be able to resolve it or assist?
Yeah, I mean, it's a constantly changing environment. You're always up against challenges on a daily basis. So being organised and making sure that you slot some time out in the day to focus on elements like proactive elements is really important. There will always be support tickets that come through the door, but if you can spend an hour or two per day either planning ahead or working on something that's going to drive your business priorities forward, even from business owners, managers, down to employees, if they're focusing on a certification, if they can carve some time out to be proactive about that, then it certainly reduces the stress. In my experience, stress comes from actually not taking action, which is ironic, really, because you think the stress comes from the amount of tasks you have to deal with. It's actually not dealing with those tasks that causes the anxiousness.
Yeah. So what would you say were the main causes of MSP burnout, and what would be the best methods of managing those?
So I think that MSP burnout comes when it starts from the beginning, really. If an MSP isn't managing the sales cycle correctly, then they're potentially onboarding customers too fast, which means that then your operations teams are going to struggle with those resources. If they're not even doing the onboarding properly of the customer, that's where the customer is fully documented, the support engineers are advised how to look after this client. If that bit's not done properly, it can create undue pressure on the teams. So although it's important for individuals to manage their own personal well-being and stay organised and make sure they're not saying yes to too much work, there's also an openness that needs to happen between management or sales that are pushing these things forward and the engineers being able to receive the work and receive it with open arms, really. So I've definitely seen sales cycles cause problems with pressure. Equally, if there's not a management openness where an employee can come and honestly say, I've got too much work on, and the employer can pacify them and be able to say, okay, well, let's prioritise, let's work out what's most important, let's schedule in time, let's use your calendar, let's stay on top of emails, let's work on the things that are really important, then if they don't have that openness in place, then you can have big issues, because what you'll see a lot in MSP environments is people turning around and going, well, you're just going to have to find a way to make it work. And the reality is that's not great management skills. That will cause burnout. The best way to approach it is, okay, what's the highest priority? Where do we need to focus our time? And how can we get organised and potentially delegate as well? And that leads me on to my third point, which is about resourcing. And if you find yourself having more of these conversations with your employees and they're becoming more and more stressed and not being able to manage the workloads, then you do need to look internally and ask yourself, are we at a point where we're ready to recruit the next member of the team?
Absolutely.
I think that capacity planning is one of the most important elements of running an MSP and looking ahead at what's potentially coming up. And it's a really difficult question to say, when am I going to recruit my next engineer? Because if you're just starting out, that's a big ask, and you're taking on a lot of responsibility, and you don't want to do that too soon and have people twiddling their thumbs and potentially setting a baseline of busyness that's too low. Yeah.
We do see issues that come in repeatedly across all the customer boards. Is there any way to handle those so we stop seeing them come in? Is it simply a case of taking a step back and all hands on deck to make sure that it's all...
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the business model. So our business model is quite proactive. We try and prevent issues. We have our Stamp Out support campaign, which is where we focus on trying to get to the cause of the issues in the first place and stop them from coming in. And that comes from implementing rigorous standards throughout your customers. So same firewall, same antivirus, same email system, all of these different standards we put in place so that it makes it more efficient for the engineers to resolve issues because they've seen them before and they're quite familiar. So issues get resolved quicker, and it means that people are able to manage a bigger workload. Whereas if you have really varied systems, it can be one person's an expert in FortiGate, one person's an expert in Cisco, and over time you can become quite diluted, and that means that people can close less cases per customer. Yeah.
And if you do get to the point in a standardized stack, if you're fixing an issue, you can then proactively go to the rest of the clients and apply that across the board if required.
Yeah, absolutely. Automation is a massive thing these days, and if you're running a RMM tool, which is where you have a remote monitoring and management tool on people's end user devices, if you've found a fix that you know is going to affect a lot of your clients, rather than waiting until you receive all the calls and tickets coming in from it, getting ahead of that and being proactive with things like Windows updates and alerts is really a really good way to reduce the amount of reactive workload that's coming in.
So when you think you're ready to recruit for that next engineer to come on board, what kind of processes or methods would you bear in mind when you're undertaking that?
It needs to be quite a rigorous process, which is a difficult one because you see online quite a lot of people talking about jumping through hoops and going through 6-stage interviews and things like that. It's important not to do that, but it's also important to have enough diligence to make sure that the person you're bringing on is a right fit for the company. So in our experience, you need someone there to grill them technically and put them through role play scenarios for tickets. Additionally, we invite people in for what we call a look-see, which is where they come into the business for half a day or so. We put them to the test and give them some tasks to try out, and equally they get a chance to meet the team and see if it's the sort of environment they want to work in as well. And lastly, attitude is a really big thing here. So we've set our standards in our attitude document of what we expect from the team, an openness, striving for greater efficiency, and those things need to align as well. So if you're looking to recruit your next engineer, you want to ask yourself, what do you think that looks like? And you need to set a baseline and a kind of mock-up of that person and that role so that when they come through the door, you know what you're comparing against, rather than recruiting someone for the wrong position or for the wrong reasons.
That's right, because recruiting people can take a lot of time, energy, effort, and eventually money. So you need to make sure that you're getting that right from the off.
Absolutely, and it doesn't just stop at recruitment as well. That's the first hurdle, I suppose, getting them through the door, making sure they're the right fit in terms of their interview, putting them in a comfortable situation where they can be themselves, and then being able to put them to the test and make sure that their expectations of what the job role is going to be are in line with what your expectations are. I've been in interviews before where they've turned up and they're expecting it to be this thing and it's not that thing at all, and the conversation kind of stops there really, which is probably for the best, to be honest. But yeah, I would say that the next stages after you've done that recruitment phase is making sure that you've got the leadership strategy in place that's going to help this person develop their skills on the job.
So we understand what managers need to do to be able to identify MSP burnout and assist in getting out of that. What can engineers or individuals do themselves to be able to start to get on top of these things or prevent it?
So being organised and prepared is something that I mentioned to start with. Using Inbox Zero to stay on top of your inbox, doing what we call pre-flight and post-flight checklists at the start of the day and the end of the day. Okay, what am I looking forward to? What do I need to put time into? And then at the end of the day, have I got back to everyone? And so on.
Hmm.
They're sort of task-driven areas. More personally speaking, and like more of a well-being answer, I suppose, is making sure that you're eating correctly, you've got the right diet, you're not eating a load of refined sugar that's going to make you slump at 2 p.m. in the afternoon, that you're taking regular breaks and you're staying on top of your own well-being. Taking a walk at lunch is a great way to just get out. And it's amazing, you'll see the studies around brain scans during walks. There's so much more creativity you'll get from going on a walk than you will from just being sedentary and going back to your desk. And being at your desk is, again, we spend a lot of time in IT, sat at our desks, answering calls, making sure that you're getting up, taking regular walks, taking a break, not just to get up and get a coffee, but actually moving around and to interact with your team members as well. When you're going home in the evening, if you have hobbies or spending time on relationships or getting enough rest is just an easy way to do it. It can be quite tempting to watch another episode on that series that you're binging on Netflix. Sometimes you need those 7-8 hours of sleep just to give it your all in the morning. Because if you burn the candle at both ends, when you come to work, you'll make more mistakes, you'll be less focused, and you'll ultimately make yourself feel like you're burning out because you've set yourself up not the best for the day. Yeah.
And what would your advice be to people who think that it's counterintuitive to take a break when they've got a big stack of a workload, and time taken away from my desk might actually cause me to slip on something? Or what would your response be there?
I think that's a loaded question. I would say that people there's enough evidence out there that taking breaks is beneficial for your decision making, for creativity. And if anyone's heard of the Pomodoro cycle, it's basically you spend 25 minutes on a task, you take 5 minutes break, you do that 3 times, and then you take a longer break. All of that is research led and about being focused on your tasks. And as we know, being focused on the task in front of you reduces mistakes, allows you to think of the best solutions going forward. And that's what we want for the team members, because they'll get a better sense of fulfillment doing that as well.
How would you say that you create a supporting environment for people to avoid MSP burnout?
I think the important thing is to have an openness towards failure, and especially around taking enough risks to be able to make mistakes that you're going to learn from, but not taking so many risks that it's a huge danger. I think recreational risk taking is a good thing, and being able to make sure that leaders and managers are not going to chastise individuals for doing the right thing, but for having an openness towards mistakes, what we call takes here, and allow them to learn from that, be constructive, and it all comes from the top. It comes from being able to sit down with someone. They've really messed up. They've already had a go at themselves in their heads. They've already sacked themselves, if you like, in their own mind, and they sit down and if as a leader you can sit with them and ask them what their thoughts were, why they thought it happened that way, what they could have done better next time, and that you're not ashamed of the failure, will lead to more committed, more loyal, more motivated team members that are ultimately going to be happier in the workplace and open to taking on more responsibilities. Otherwise, everyone is just going to be scared and won't take any risks, and you'll have a really static business.
Yeah, I think for any mistakes that are made, there's a time and a place for chastising, and it's got to be done in the right way and well delivered.
Mm.
For us, the first thing to do would be to keep the customer happy and make sure everything is safe, everybody's working, everybody's happy, and then we can deal with the rest of the fallout later down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not, I'm certainly not advising that you shouldn't take bad behaviour or negligence to task. I think that does need to be addressed. But I would say that if it's not a situation like that and it's someone trying to do their best and they've still not managed to get it over the line, there's a real constructive way to be able to approach that and make sure that it's a lesson to be learned rather than an opportunity to be missed.
So, how would you say a constructive approach to mistakes can help prevent MSP burnout?
Well, if you create an environment where people can feel confident that they can take safe risks, if that's such a thing, and progress and receive positive feedback and constructive guidance and direction from the leadership team, and also take responsibility for themselves and build their own initiative, they're going to be more motivated members of the team. You can then develop that into a career ladder and make sure that all of the decision making that's done in your business is kind of led from the people bringing solutions to the table. We've always thrown around a sort of quirk about wanting to have a seat at the table but not bring in a chair. It's really important to bring a chair, bring some solutions. Here's how I think we should approach the problem, and then discuss it with the decision makers to make the best route forward. And if you are constructive about failings and mistakes, then you definitely build an openness, and people aren't disheartened by failings along the way, because life will throw those things at you and it will not stop. And the irony is, the more responsibility you take on, the harder you work, the bigger clients you get, the bigger those things will be and the more challenging they will be. And that's the beauty of it, really, is you can continue to develop your skill set by fighting bigger battles along the way, and knowing that you've got a supportive environment around you that's not going to take away responsibility for making mistakes means that you can grow a really loyal and committed team to the vision that you're trying to build.
And you just touched on taking safe risks, as it were. If someone was finding themselves in a position where they're making unsafe risks, could it be the management maybe aren't available to provide that support, or their peers around them?
It's a good question, and I imagine that does happen. You've got a busy MSP owner running around fixing servers, and you've got a couple of people in the office that try to take those. I think that just comes back to being organised and being proactive. You need to be available for your team members. You need to put time into proactive one-to-one sessions with them. You need to set the expectation of what risks should and shouldn't be taken, and you need to have a really committed and supported management style in place so that those unsafe risks it's really clear what's important, and they're not just doing things because so and so said so. They're saying, no, based on our principles here, this is what we would typically do. We need another person to validate it, and that's good too. We have a system here where we sound off each other quite regularly. You could have someone that's kind of less senior than you and less experienced, but they can have a sounding board with you to go, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And it's amazing how often you'll see more senior people get stuck in a hole with tunnel vision, not being able to think of the solution, and someone else even less experienced can help get them out of that. Yeah. So yeah, it's really important to have a supportive environment and team around you.
Thank you so much, Lewis, for joining us today. Appreciate your time as always.
You're very welcome. It's been a pleasure to be here.
So over the next few weeks and months, we'll be talking more about IT, MSP, and everything that involves. So hopefully you've enjoyed what you've heard from us today. And if you did, please do drop us a comment down below or come and check out our other social media channels. Thanks ever so much for joining us. Take care, and we'll see you soon.